Title: While I was overseas, my dad called. I used your college fund to pay off my loans. You didn't need it anyway. I calmly replied, "Good luck with that," when he realized what I'd done. It was already too late. The call that changed everything. The call came at 3:12 a.m. local time. I was in a tiny apartment in Amsterdam, working late on a fellowship project, with a mug of stale coffee beside my laptop, when my American number lit up the screen. Dad. I hadn't heard from him in weeks. We weren't exactly close, but I still felt a flicker of dread as I picked up. He sounded casual, almost smug. "Hey, kiddo. Just a heads up. I had to dip into your college fund. Paid off the last of my loans. Big relief, honestly." I blinked. "What fund?" "You know, the one Grandpa started. You weren't using it, right? I figured you had scholarships or something. You didn't need it anyway." That last sentence echoed. "You didn't need it anyway." I swallowed hard. "You emptied it?" "Yeah, all gone. But hey, don't worry. You'll figure it out. You always do." I sat very still. Thousands of dollars. Meant for graduate school. Meant for my future. Gone. Not for an emergency. Not for survival. For his comfort. And just like that, I felt something snap. Not in anger. In clarity. "I see," I said quietly. "Well, good luck with that." He laughed, like it was a joke. But I wasn't joking. And by the time he realized that, it was already far too late. Terms and conditions. I didn't cry. Not when the call ended. Not when I checked the account and saw the balance. 13 cents. Not even when I found the final transfer memo. Loan consolidation. ACH transfer approved by primary trustee. Robert Greene. Primary trustee. Of course. My dad was still technically the controller of the fund Grandpa had set up when I was 8. It was supposed to be mine. It had my name on it. But the paperwork said, "Until Claire turns 30. I was 29. I stared at the screen for a long time. He hadn't just emptied my college fund. He'd waited to do it. Timed it perfectly, right before I aged into full control. And why? Because he didn't think I'd need it. Because I'd won scholarships, worked jobs, took internships. Because I'd been too damn independent. He didn't think I'd notice. Or care. But what he didn't know was I wasn't just in Amsterdam for a fellowship. I was also working with a research tech startup. And I had equity. Small at first. But we'd just signed a 7-figure licensing deal with a US health tech company. My name was on the patent paperwork as a co-developer. By the time my dad bragged about wiping my fund clean, I was already in the process of becoming very, very financially secure. So I wasn't going to scream. I wasn't going to demand he pay me back. I was going to remove him. From everything. I opened my estate planning binder. Updated my legal contacts. Removed him as emergency contact. Revoked his access as financial co-signer on anything tied to my name. Sent a notarized statement to my trust advisor. Effective immediately. Robert Greene is not to be listed or contacted in association with any present or future estate, asset, or transfer bearing my name. I even drafted a new education trust for a future child I might never have, just to ensure he would never touch $1 of legacy money again. He had stolen what was meant to give me freedom. Now, I would ensure he never benefited from my success again. 3 days later, my dad sent me a casual text. "Hey, your old high school wants to feature you in their alumni spotlight. I told them I'd send your number." I didn't reply. He wanted a photo, a quote, a line he could brag about over dinner. "She's doing so well. We always knew she would." He needed the illusion that he had built something. He had no idea he'd already been written out of it. No forwarding address. My father tried calling again the next week. I let it ring once. Then I blocked the number. Then came the email. Subject: Need to talk. "I think you're upset. I didn't mean to upset you. You said good luck. So I assumed we were good. Let me know if you want to talk. I didn't respond. Instead, I contacted my alma mater and requested that all alumni communications be rerouted to my new personal email, one that he didn't know existed. I also asked that they not share any quotes, bios, or pictures provided by family, unless confirmed by me. 3 days later, I received confirmation that someone had attempted to submit a parental spotlight for their next alumni magazine. It was rejected. By me. The truth was, my dad had always used my accomplishments like ornaments. He hadn't shown up to my scholarship awards, hadn't flown out for my first research publication. But the minute he could attach my name to his, he'd post it like it was his own resume. I didn't want revenge. I wanted removal, and I was almost done. I finalized the last piece that Thursday, a formal audit request to the family trust executor, my late grandfather's lawyer, who I still had a professional relationship with. The request was simple. Please verify that all withdrawals from the fund between January 1st and December 31st were made in accordance with the terms of the trust. It wasn't a threat. It was a paper trail, the kind that forced people like my dad to explain themselves to professionals who knew better. 2 weeks later, I received a thin envelope in my Amsterdam mailbox, my father's handwriting on the front. Inside, a check, $2,000, and a note. This is what I can pay back for now. I didn't realize how much this meant to you. Let's talk when you're home. 2,000 from a man who had stolen over 70. It wasn't an apology. It was a bribe. I folded the check neatly, walked it straight to the cafe across the street, slipped it into the tip jar. The barista blinked. Are you sure? Yeah, I said. Someone gave it to me, thinking money fixes everything. She laughed, not understanding. Well, their loss, I smiled. Exactly. I walked out into the rain, head clear. My father hadn't just stolen from me. He had bet against me. And now he was finally learning what happens when you underestimate the daughter you never really knew. The quietest goodbye. I flew back to the U.S. 3 months after the call. Not for him. For a conference, a presentation. My name on the schedule, printed bold beside the words, lead researcher, cognitive tech and medicine. The conference was held just 2 cities from where I grew up. When my mother found out, because she still followed my LinkedIn, she texted me, "Your father's hoping you'll visit while you're in town." I didn't reply. I didn't owe him a visit, but I owed myself closure. I arrived at their house unannounced, just long enough for him to feel the chill I carried in the place where warmth used to live. He opened the door, already smiling. "Claire, I knew you'd come." I stepped inside, gaze steady. "Don't confuse showing up with coming back." He blinked. Look, about the fund, I'm not here for a speech," I said. "I just came to collect something." He looked confused. I pointed toward the hallway closet. Inside, buried beneath stacks of tax files and sports memorabilia, was an old fireproof lockbox, the one Grandpa had left with all our documents, wills, letters, the original trust agreement. I opened it, took out one envelope with my name on it, in Grandpa's handwriting, left everything else untouched. He watched me like I was a stranger. "You're really this angry?" "No," I said. "I'm just no longer interested in pretending you didn't choose yourself over me." He stepped forward. "Claire, come on. I raised you." "No," I said, sharper now. "Mom raised me. Scholarships carried me. I built myself. You just happened to be there." He opened his mouth, closed it. I walked past him to the door, and then I turned around. "You said I didn't need it anyway." He nodded slowly, guiltily. "I did," I said, "but I didn't need you." I left him standing in that doorway, not out of cruelty, but because sometimes the best revenge is removing yourself from the table they only invited you to clean. That night, I opened Grandpa's envelope. Inside was a handwritten note. Claire, if you're reading this, I hope you remember what I always told you. Build something no one can take away. You'll be more than fine. You'll be unforgettable. Love always, Grandpa. And tucked inside was a key. The key and the will. I took the key to the one person who would know what it meant. Mr. Langston, my grandfather's longtime attorney. He looked at the envelope, the handwriting, and then at me, with a strange mix of sadness and relief. I was wondering when you'd come. He opened a locked drawer, pulled out a slim file, and slid it across his desk. Your grandfather revised his estate 3 months before he passed, he said. Said you were the only one who ever visited without asking for anything. Inside the file was a copy of a secondary trust. It wasn't massive, but it was entirely in my name. A small plot of land in Maine, an untouched savings account, and rights to a long-term investment fund that had grown slowly, quietly, and consistently. He didn't want your father to know, Mr. Langston said. Said if Robert ever got desperate, he'd take what he could reach. This was buried deeper. I sat still. My grandfather had planned for the betrayal. He hadn't just protected money, he'd protected me. I transferred the trust quietly, opened a foundation in his name, the Elias Green Memorial Grant. It would fund underrepresented rural students seeking STEM careers, a cause he would have loved. The only name listed on the paperwork? Mine. I didn't tell my father. Instead, I mailed him a copy of the public notice from the foundation's website. No cover letter, no message, just a headline that read, Granddaughter establishes STEM fund with secret inheritance. Grandfather's quiet gift lives on. He wasn't in the article. He wasn't mentioned in the will. And when he Googled his own father's name, he would see mine attached to every result. 2 days later, I got a single text. I didn't know he left you that. I stared at it, then turned off my phone, because in the end, he had emptied my college fund. But I had inherited everything that actually mattered. A legacy, a name, a future he could no longer touch. Paid in full 3 months passed. The foundation gained traction. 3 applications rolled in during the first week. By the end of the month, I had spoken at 2 webinars and signed a partnership agreement with a nonprofit focused on underserved youth in rural science education. And in every press mention, it was my name beside my grandfather's. Not my father's. Not the family surname he thought gave him leverage. Mine. I moved the trust accounts to a new private advisor, someone who didn't know my parents, didn't care about legacy status or family history, someone who only knew what I'd built. I rewrote my will, left everything to the foundation, listed my future estate to go toward grant expansion, removed all biological family from beneficiary status permanently. Not out of pettiness, out of precision, because once someone tells you, you didn't need it anyway, they've already told you how they value your place in their world. So I built a new world, where my value didn't need to be explained or defended, just protected. I never told my father about the land in Maine. I never sent him photos of the cabins I was helping fund for students doing summer research, but I knew he saw it. I saw the red receipts on every foundation newsletter, the open rates, the clicks. He read every single one, and I never blocked him, because watching me thrive quietly, without ever needing him again, that was the truest sentence I could send. He had gambled my future to save his past, and in the end, all he was left with was emptiness, while I had everything, not just the money, but the power, the name, the peace. I returned to Amsterdam the next season, my bags lighter, my silence louder. I stood outside the university research wing where it had all started, the late nights, the exhaustion, the moment I'd received his call that changed everything. And I smiled, because I had turned that betrayal into a blueprint, not for revenge, but for freedom. He called me selfish. He said I didn't need it. Now he would spend the rest of his life explaining why his daughter, who had everything, left him with nothing. And I wouldn't say a word, because when it's done right, revenge doesn't need a voice. It just needs a closing line. Paid. In. Full. You are not alone, and you are so much stronger than you think. Tap that subscribe button to join Veiled Revenge, where we share tales that heal, inspire, and remind you that even the deepest heartbreak can lead to the most beautiful new beginning. Share this with someone who needs a reminder that revenge isn't always about getting even. Sometimes it's just about getting better.